They didn't push you. You just moved. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They didn't threaten. But somehow, you backed down. You explained. You softened. You gave ground. And you thought, I chose to do that. But did you? What if it wasn't your choice? Just a reflex you were trained into. A look. A pause. A perfectly timed silence. And suddenly, you're adjusting. Reacting. Folding. That's not communication. That's emotional steering. Subtle. Silent. Strategic. They never said what they wanted. But you still gave it. Not from pressure, but from programming. That's not your power. That's their access. You weren't manipulated through logic. You were moved through emotional design. And every time it works, they don't need to control you. You'll auto-correct yourself. But here's the shift. You don't reverse this with arguments. You don't fight it head-on. You flip it. Silently. By breaking your predictability. By refusing to perform on cue. Let's reset the frame. Let's break the emotional script. Let's begin the silent comeback. Manipulation isn't always loud. It's most dangerous when it's subtle. You think manipulation is obvious, aggressive, director, loud. But real manipulation, the kind that actually works, is subtle. It doesn't confront. It suggests. It doesn't push. It waits for you to move yourself. It looks like a pause long enough to make you second guess, a sigh that makes you explain, a silence that pulls guilt out of nowhere. You fill the space. You apologize. You adjust. Not because they told you to, but because you were trained to make discomfort go away. That's the trap. You don't see the control because there's no demand, just implied emotion. You don't hear a threat, just a tone. You don't see a rule, just an invisible expectation. And you think you're being kind, polite, empathetic. But what you're really being is redirected. Emotional manipulation works because it doesn't challenge your logic. It bypasses it. It uses your nervous system against you. And the better they read you, the more you move before they even speak. They don't want your obedience. They want your self-correction. Because that's how they stay clean and you stay confused. Your auto-submission, your internal shrinkage. So they never have to ask. You'll do the work for them. That's why the most dangerous manipulation feels like you're doing the right thing. You're being the bigger person. You're keeping the peace. You're being emotionally intelligent. But really, you're just being predictable. Cold mind doesn't fight back. It breaks the system by refusing to respond on cue. Not with anger, with unreadability. That's how you shift the frame. Not louder, not sharper, just colder. And that's where we go next. Signs you're being manipulated, but think you're just being nice. Manipulation rarely feels like manipulation. It feels like empathy, like kindness, like doing the right thing. That's what makes it work. Here are the signs. 1. You apologize for things you didn't do wrong, not because you meant to, but because the silence made you feel guilty. Their energy shifted. You filled the gap with your voice, with your peace, and they never had to ask. 2. You change your plans because they seemed disappointed. No request, no demand, just a vibe. And you moved, not out of clarity, but out of internal pressure to not let them down, even when they never said you did. 3. You feel bad when you set a boundary. You say no, but feel the need to explain it, justify it, soften it, because their face changed, their tone dropped, their message slowed, and instead of holding your line, you started managing their reaction. 4. You take responsibility for their emotional state. They feel distant. You reach out. They withdraw. You over-explain. You think you're being considerate. But really, you're over-functioning for someone who's trained you to react. 5. You call it compromise. But the scale only tips toward them. You adjust. You bend. You give. And every time you do, they don't thank you. They expect it next time. You're not compromising. You're being conditioned. These signs don't look like weakness. They look like emotional maturity. But maturity without boundaries is just soft obedience. And if your behavior is always adapting to someone else's unspoken reaction, you're not being thoughtful. You're being directed. Cold mind doesn't overcorrect. It observes. It pauses. It holds position. Even when silence gets heavy. Even when guilt shows up. Even when they shift tone to make you move first. That's the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional control. The power of the unpredictable response. The silent comeback. Manipulation doesn't need power. It just needs prediction. If they know how you'll react, they don't need to pressure you. They just press the pattern. Pauses. Tone shift. One well-placed, "I'm fine," and you fold. But when your response becomes unpredictable, the system breaks. Because now they don't know what move triggers what result. And without predictable outcome, they lose leverage. That's the silent comeback. Not louder, not stronger, just unreadable. You don't argue. You pause. You don't explain. You withhold. You don't soften when expected. You don't spike when provoked. You hold still and let the discomfort sit in their system. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking the script. Because every manipulator runs a script. And your job isn't to confront it. It's to stop delivering the next line. Let them wonder. Let them wait. Let them feel what it's like to be outside your emotional control panel. The strongest reversal is not resistance, it's absence of reaction. The moment they can't calculate your behavior, they stop trying to control it. Because what can't be predicted can't be steered. The silent comeback doesn't make a scene. It just disconnects the system they were secretly plugged into. And that's how you take your position back, without raising your voice. Reverse manipulation. 3 tactical steps to regain emotional control. You don't fight manipulation with emotion. You break it with structure, not by reacting harder, but by removing access. Here's how cold mind flips the system. 1. Observe the move. Every manipulator has a tell. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's silence, a pause, a shift in tone, a subtle withdrawal until you reach. That's not distance, that's bait. So before you react, ask, what are they trying to make me feel responsible for? Not what they said. What your nervous system suddenly wants to fix. That's where the manipulation starts, in your reflex. 2. Freeze the reflex. Most control doesn't come from what they do. It comes from what you do next. You soften, you explain, you chase. That's where they win. So freeze the moment. Pause the auto-response. Don't fill the space. Don't soothe the tension. Just hold. Even 5 seconds of non-response rewrites the dynamic. Because now, you're no longer inside the pattern. You're holding the remote. 3. Respond from frame, not feeling. Once you've held the pause, respond. Not with guilt, not with defense, but from your system. You already decided your boundaries, your tone, your standard. Now run it. Without apology, without commentary. If they ask why, you don't explain. You state. If they guilt you, you don't absorb. You redirect. If they change tone, you don't match it. You maintain. This is reverse manipulation. Not control over them, but disconnection from their control over you. It's not louder. It's clearer. You break their pattern by breaking your own first. They were trained to move you. Now they face something new, a system that doesn't move. And eventually, they stop trying. Because cold mind isn't about defense. It's about stillness so strong, it collapses the game without ever playing it. Final message. The person who breaks the game by not playing it. Duration. Approximately 2 minutes, approximately 280 words. You've met someone like this. They don't argue. They don't chase. They don't explain. You throw silence. They don't fill it. You hint guilt. They don't absorb it. You change your energy. They keep theirs. It's frustrating at first, because they don't move the way you're used to people moving. They don't flinch when you withdraw. They don't soften when you shift. They don't apologize for holding frame. They're not cold. They're clear. You can't predict them. You can't test them. And when you can't test them, you stop trying to control them. This is the power of someone who no longer responds on emotional autopilot. They don't escalate. They don't entertain the script. They don't need to win. They just don't move unless they chose to. That's what cold mind trains. Not louder comebacks, quieter control. You don't flip manipulation with force. You flip it by becoming too still to steer. In the next video, we'll expose identity anchoring, how people shape your sense of self so you keep playing the same emotional role even after the game is over. Subscribe. Don't defend. Don't perform. Stay unreadable. Break the frame. Silently.